One of the things I remember when I first moved here, so that was like 10 years after the fire, is you could drive this highway and this was like where you would go to see fireweed. That was the view, like the hills would be pink and it was gorgeous, and you tell people like if you want to see a beautiful view of fireweed, go drive up to the Fox Lake Burn. But now that's not really the case anymore, and it's interesting we have to kind of change some of our interpretive materials because forests change and regenerate. And so now I say, come drive the highway in the fall to see the trembling aspen when they turn golden in the fall, because this whole valley is just glowing yellow, like golden. And if you catch it on one of those crisp, sunny days in September, you have to pull over and just look and appreciate it. The whole hill is yellow. It's beautiful.
This is Yukon Wildlife and Wildfire.
In this series, we take a walk in the woods and look at how the forest changes and evolves after wildfire. At every step, we're on the lookout for plants and animals, big and small.
And sometimes we ask passionate researchers and experts to chime in. I'm Karen McCall.
And I'm Carrie McClelland. We're both naturalists with the Yukon Department of Environment's Wildlife Viewing Program. We don't leave home without binoculars and field guides.
This podcast is for everyone who has burning questions about wildlife and wildfire.
That's good. I see what you did there.
Fire's over, but that's only just the start. Just the start.
In our last two episodes, we went to the Takini Bridge Fire of 2023 and wandered around the burn to look at what is growing back and what animals might come into those areas. If you haven't listened to those episodes, go back and check them out. Today we're going to go to the Fox Lake burn from a fire in 1998.
Right. And this fire, it was started by people, right?
Yeah, sadly from a campfire that wasn't put out well enough.
Right. So this fire is on the North Klondike Highway. And you don't start seeing it till the very north end of Fox Lake is where you might notice some changes in the forest.
Yeah, about 45 minutes north of Whitehorse, maybe even less.
This was a big fire, like especially compared to the Takini Bridge fire. This was a serious big fire.
So the Takini Bridge fire that we were in was 12 square kilometers. This one is 400 square kilometers. So even if, nobody can picture 400 square kilometers, you still know that that's exponentially bigger. And because of that, too, it also, fires don't burn evenly. The vegetation is varied, the landscape, the angles, the dryness. So it creates what's called a fire mosaic. You can imagine like a patchwork quilt of areas that burned differently, different temperatures and whatnot. So that creates a very diverse habitat.
Okay, so that's like when you see one hillside that's burned to a crisp, and at the very bottom, for unknown reasons, there's like 12 trees that didn't burn. And, the magic of fire, it just doesn't burn everything always completely. It's a mosaic out there.
In our last episodes, I talked to boreal ecologist Jill Johnstone, and she talked about succession and how we can expect a forest to grow back after fire.
I like to think of vegetation succession in the boreal forest as shuffling a deck of cards. And the deal is laid or played when the fire happens. And then which cards are played out as a result of which seeds get there or which vegetation was present before the fire, that determines the hand that you play. And how long you play is related to other factors like who else is at the board.
Okay, so how does that metaphor work for you?
I like the metaphor, saying that what you can expect to grow back would be similar to what was there before the fire, roughly, but of course there are a lot of factors. As we know from this fire, because you and I have been there, that there's a lot of aspen growing back. And that's not surprising because we're roughly 30 years post-fire now, and we know from succession that that's around the time when the aspen trees would be outgrowing all the shrubbery and that the aspen would be sort of like the dominant canopy in a forest.
We know that the forest fire cycle is on this 50 to 200 year roughly cycle. Let's explain to folks what's going on ecologically at 50 years that suddenly says, yeah, I'm ready to start a fire again in the forest.
Well, for the first 50 years of a forest's lifespan, if we can call it that, there's a lot of deciduous vegetation. So lots of green, leafy stuff, willows, shrubs, aspen. And we know kind of intuitively, I think, that this kind of vegetation doesn't burn that easily.
It's not the kind of stuff you would collect for your campfire. It's not great.
Yeah, and you think of an aspen, it's got this smooth bark, and it doesn't have any branches along the ground for a ground fire to burn up. So at this 50-year mark, that's roughly when the coniferous trees, the pine and the spruce trees, could start to outgrow the aspen trees, and cutting the aspen trees off from the sunlight, and eventually the aspen trees die out. And these coniferous trees are a lot more flammable. You think of that, like their rough bark and those dry branches close to the ground, and a fire's coming along the ground and can quite easily burn up into the tree.
Like those branches are the key for starting your campfire. You always go looking for those dry understory branches of spruce and pine. So that doesn't mean that there can't be a fire in an aspen forest. It's just less likely to catch that spark as easily because this wood is like green and very moist. Like aspen and poplar trees hold a lot of moisture naturally. So it's just more fire resistant than a dry coniferous forest.
Yeah, and today we're going to head out to one very small part of this burn of the whole 400 square kilometers. But we'll see on this trail that there is a lot of downed wood. There is a lot of wood that could burn. It would just burn differently than if it was a fully coniferous forest.
Yeah, let's go.
Let's head out there. We drive about an hour north of Whitehorse and pull off at a rest stop at kilometer 272 of the North Klondike Highway. All right, Fox Lake Burn Viewpoint. We park beside an outhouse and a carved wooden sign that reads, Fox Lake Burn, the Fire of '98. Our predecessors at Yukon Wildlife Viewing developed a short interpretive trail here many years ago. The first interpretive panel reads, What Happened Here? History of the Fox Lake Fire. It informs us that this fire was started during the July long weekend of 1998 by campers who didn't properly extinguish their campfire near Little Fox Lake. The fire danger at the time was extreme. Strong wind quickly whipped the small blaze into a crown fire that roared through the treetops. At that stage, a fire is near impossible to control. Efforts continued all summer to contain the fire. Over winter, it smoldered in the ground and was extinguished in the spring. The Fox Lake fire cost $2.2 million to fight, in 1998 dollars, of course, and altered the look and life of the landscape. No kidding. Another more perfunctory sign informs us that the interpretive trail leads 200 meters one way to a viewpoint. So this is 27 years after the fire, so we're talking about the stage of succession.
One of the things that I find super interesting about this trail in particular is even in my career.
For a second, look behind you. Oh, there's a snowshoe hare.
But it's already turned white. But it hasn't snowed yet.
A snowshoe hare cowers against some bushes less than 3 meters away. Staying still and blending in with its surroundings is a defense strategy hares use. Normally, it might work well, but this bunny's stark white fur stands out against the brown foliage. Brown because it's October. It's out of sync with the surrounding terrain.
I wonder if it thinks we can't see it.
I wonder. Carrie tries to get a photo of the unlucky hare, but the animal darts into the bush. As it turns out, we aren't the only ones seeing white hares out of season. According to a 2025 paper published in the Royal Society of Open Science, snowshoe hare in the Kluane region of the Yukon are not changing color any later than usual in the fall in response to climate change. Meaning that while it might be snowing later in the season, on average, these hares are still molting in October. Winter be darned. Snowshoe hare are named for their big feet, but it wasn't until I saw a photo from a motion-triggered camera that I truly appreciated this. It captured the hare mid-leap, with its massive hind feet reaching forward and its toes spread wide for extra support on the snow. In winter, you can see from their tracks that their hind feet, which land first, are much bigger than their front feet.
I think this is a great forest for snowshoe hare. There's lots of browse for them. There's lots of low shrubs, like the willows are starting to get a bit tall, but there's some smaller species. There's lots of soapberries, low-lying shrubs, and that's key for them. So not only do they have something to eat, but they have someplace to hide. They need all this debris to weave in and out. But snowshoe hares are like a major food source for a number of different species, in particular lynx. So this is a great place to come and look for lynx. And again, the open aspen forest means that you have the chance of seeing something a long way off. So lynx, like all cats, are very stealthy, and you could walk right by one, or it could walk right by you and you would never know because they're so silent. But in a forest like this that's quite a bit more open, you have a better chance of being able to see them.
Canada lynx have evolved to feed primarily on snowshoe hare. The hare population in southern Yukon follows a roughly 10-year cycle. In that time, the number of hares peaks and plunges. I asked our colleague Tom Jung, senior wildlife biologist, to elaborate on the much-studied relationship between snowshoe hare and lynx. Of lynx, he says,
their fortunes rise and fall with that of snowshoe hares. So it's a real boom-bust economy out there in the food web of the boreal forest, that when you have these booms of snowshoe hares, of bunnies, that there will be a following increase in the lynx population. Usually there's a lag of 1 or 2 years. It takes the lynx 1 or 2 years for their populations to build up in response to bunnies. So what's happening is you're having better fed mothers that have A, more kits, but B, healthier kits that survive. So that process over 1 or 2 lynx generations results in more lynx.
Conversely, when the snowshoe hare population crashes, it leads to an eventual decline in the lynx population. At the moment, though, we're in a snowshoe hare population upswing of record magnitude.
In southwestern Yukon, Dr. Charles Krebs from the University of British Columbia and many others that have helped him have been looking at snowshoe hare cycles since 1973. And what we've been seeing this year, in 2025, we've been seeing a really rapid increase of snowshoe hares from a low. In fact, right now, based on trapping we did in September of this year, it's the most bunnies we've seen at this stage of the cycle since Charlie Krebs has been monitoring them, since the 1970s and 1980s. And we think we're not even there yet. We think there's another year to go. So what we believe we're witnessing is a super peak, which is super exciting.
This super peak has the potential to fill a lot of bellies.
The bunnies are what we call the keystone species. They're the engine that drives the food web of the boreal forest. So it's a whole long list, but it includes things like lynx, which are the main predator of bunnies that specialize on eating them, coyotes, foxes, wolves, wolverines, all the birds of prey, from golden eagles to great horned owls. Nobody's going to escape eating a bunny. Even red squirrels will eat baby bunnies, as sad as that sounds.
Those red squirrels are feisty. Back in the Fox Lake burn with Carrie, we revisit what she was saying just before we got distracted by the white-haired snowshoe hare.
So what I find so interesting about this trail is that even in my lifetime, I've seen the change, which you think about regeneration after a fire, forest fire having like going on for decades and decades. And it does, you know, a forest, when we said reaches kind of climax 50 to 200 years. But when I first got here, you could see along this trail that the landscape all around you, it was quite barren, and now it's almost overgrown and you can't see it. It kind of makes you wonder, like, why would they put a trail here? There's nothing to see. And then it's like, well, that's not what the forest looked like when we first built it.
This patch of forest is a mix of willows of various sizes, full-sized aspen, and the odd spruce and pine tree that are taller than me, but not by much. Now, Carrie, here, it's kind of a good example here before we get into the wind of like an aspen and spruce tree side by side. So the aspen tree is almost 3 times as tall as the spruce tree, but this kind of shows that the spruce tree is a slower growing species, but eventually at some point it will outgrow this aspen tree.
Yeah, I mean, 27 years is still pretty young for a landscape.
This spruce tree may have also started growing after the aspen, especially if the aspen regrew from underground roots in the first season after the fire. The spruce tree had to arrive by seed, either in the wind or in or on an animal. Labrador tea?
Yeah. You would not find that in a young forest. Soapberry.
Quite a bit more soapberry than what we saw at the Ibex fire.
We couldn't go cross country as easily as we did at the Ibex fire here. There's like tons of shrubs. Willows are grown up. Logs have either they fell in the fire or they fell later, and now travel would be, I mean, not impossible, but it definitely would be more challenging than there was in the Ibex fire.
Yeah, you'd be properly bushwhacking through here a little bit. The understory is full of fallen over trees and logs and upturned roots. Tom says this three-dimensional quality to the forest creates structure. And that structure provides mini travel runways and corridors for animals like red-backed voles. And when the voles move in, yep, so do their predators.
Which are weasels, pine marten, for example, boreal owls, for example, will come in. And that structure is really good to weasels and marten, for example, not just because of the voles, but it provides a lot of what we call rest sites, which are really den-like structures. And so as we talked about the overturned trees and the root wads, those are great spots that martens will use to get into and get out of the weather, get a little bit of insulation from the cold because the snow will pile up around them, and essentially they become their homes.
The trail leads us out of the forest to a bluff overlooking a creek. Across the valley is a mostly aspen-covered mountain hillside interspersed with clumps of conifers. It's quite scenic.
This is still, I mean, the Fox Lake Fire, this is still prime elk habitat. It's still that open aspen parkland. And so this would be, up here at Fox Lake, this would be more likely Brayburn herd territory. And we do see on this hillside across the valley some game trails where probably elk have been walking back and forth quite frequently.
Oh, we got more elk poop here. You won't find elk much further north than here. Carmacks, about an hour's drive, is at the northern edge of their range. It's believed that elk migrated to the Yukon during the last ice age, over 10,000 years ago, but at some point they disappeared from the landscape. They were reintroduced in the 1950s. There are only a few hundred in the whole territory, mostly in the triangular area between Whitehorse, Carmacks, and Haines Junction. This ridge offers a view up and down the valley. It would be a great place to be at sunset, to sit quietly and watch for elk to wander by. But right now it's windy and chilly, so we retreat the way we came, stepping off the trail to investigate the bush. Why don't we come in here? Why don't we Oh, here's a bunch of grouse poop. Grouse poo always amazes me because it's so big, like the piles of it, like the volume of it compared to the size of the bird.
That tripped me up. Like, I think it's porcupine because I was like, there's no way a small chicken made that much poop.
Grouse are, as Carrie says, chicken-sized. Their scat, it's important to know, is pencil-sized in diameter and about 3/4 of an inch long. That's not huge, but as mentioned, the size of the piles are rather extraordinary. There are several species of grouse in the Yukon. This scat could be from the ruffed grouse, which feeds on the buds and leaves of shrubs. Ruffed grouse can also digest and tolerate the bitter compound chemical present in aspen trees, which is a defense mechanism the aspen trees have against overbrowsing. This is important for ruffed grouse because aspen is an important food source for them in winter. This adaptation allows them to survive this far north. Ruffed grouse are also quite showy. When a male ruffed grouse is on the hunt for a female, it fluffs up its feathers around its head into a collar, or ruff. Males will also make a drumming sound by beating their wings rapidly against their body. If you've ever heard the sound of a car backing up in the middle of the woods, you might have heard the ruffed grouse. It sounds like pop, 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 pop. Another bird that relies heavily on aspen trees, although in a much different way, is the northern flicker. It's a type of woodpecker and I think one of the more striking birds in the boreal forest. It has polka dots on its chest and a flash of red on its head, but it's often its white rump that gives it away when it's flying through the forest. I spoke to Dr. Katie Aitken about northern flickers. She has spent most of her career studying animals that make and use tree cavities.
I'm an associate professor and program coordinator in the Northern Environmental and Conservation Sciences program at Yukon University. And we offer this program in partnership with the University of Alberta. So I'm also an adjunct professor at University of Alberta.
Northern flickers are quite a large woodpecker, but Katie says their bills aren't as strong as other woodpeckers, like the black-backed woodpecker we talked about in episode 1. So flickers select softer trees for their cavities. They often target aspen because these trees are susceptible to trunk rot. This fungus causes decay inside the tree, making it easier for flickers to excavate once they get through the outer bark.
So the woodpecker just has to break through that hard open shell, and then they can get inside the tree where things are rotting out and further dig out a hole that they can then in or roost in.
The northern flicker eats insects like ants and beetles, but unlike other woodpeckers, they mostly forage on the ground. Flickers are known to reuse cavities from one season to another. When they do move out, other birds and mammals move in. Katie says American kestrels often use cavities made by flickers. They're a small raptor, about the size of a pigeon, but don't be fooled by their stature. They can tear into small rodents and songbirds, preferring to forage in open areas.
One of the nest trees that I found in the Takini burn was what we call an apartment tree, where you have several cavities in it and you have multiple individuals nesting in that tree at the same time. So in this case, there was an American kestrel in one of the cavities with some chicks, and there was also a northern flicker with eggs in another cavity in that same tree, just kind of out in an open area. It was a big, tall, dead tree with a whole bunch of cavities in it. And so they were kind of sharing that tree in this open area in the burn, which was kind of fun to see.
Wow.
Cavities that are lower in the tree can be used by red squirrel, voles, and mice, although they might not want to use the same tree as a kestrel. Katie is particularly interested in what she calls nest webs, the interconnections and dynamics between all the creatures that make and use tree cavities.
Once those cavities are created, they tend to stay in the landscape for quite a long time, especially here in the Yukon where things are pretty dry and don't rot very quickly. So those cavities can stay in that tree once they're created for decades, potentially, if not longer. And so then other organisms can come and use those cavities that the woodpeckers have now vacated. So you'll have a whole suite of birds and small mammals that use them for nesting, raising young, roosting. A lot of insects, different invertebrates use them, bees and wasps and things like that. And essentially then those different species that are using these cavities will then potentially be competing with one another to get access to those cavities.
Because of their size, Katie says northern flickers are an important provider of medium to large-sized cavities for animals that can't make their own. If flickers weren't present in the system for some reason, there would be a big ripple effect.
And so if any of these are lost, if something happens to them, then that potentially removes this really crucial resource for a lot of these species. So for a lot of things like tree swallows, bluebirds, American kestrels, there's several species of ducks that nest in cavities. And so for all of them, if they can't find a suitable cavity that was created, say, by a woodpecker, then they can't breed, period.
I've always appreciated northern flickers aesthetically, but I didn't realize how critical they are to the entire ecosystem. And one thing we're probably not going to see in this aspen forest is the red squirrel.
When do you not hear a squirrel? I think we hear it so often that maybe we should filter it out. But it's interesting to walk in here and be like, something's missing. And it's squirrels. You don't hear them.
Red squirrels mainly eat the seeds of white spruce trees. Not much of that around here.
We stepped out of a predominantly aspen area, and now these are deadheads, like old snags that have been burned, and tall, like 2-meter tall willow. But we're not really surrounded by trembling aspen here.
These, Carrie, looks like they've been gnawed off, like the tops of all these.
Yeah. Yeah, you can see the bite marks.
The very bottom, too.
Yeah. And it's like fresh green growth, like really nutrient rich. They don't like the old woody stuff because it's not as delicious.
It looks like a snowshoe hare has been gnawing on these shrubs.
I do think it's interesting if you come back in the early spring after the snow and the snowshoe hare walk on top of the snow. And so you'll definitely see evidence of browse at like knee level because that's where the snowshoe hare were. And so the tree is fine below and above it, but at that sort of snow level, Are we just, you just turned us into a liar. It's right there in that pine tree.
Oh, yeah, there is a red squirrel.
Surviving off of that one pine tree in this whole stand. Thanks for making me a liar. That always happens, though. I'm like, well, generally, you won't find animals here doing this. And then, like, lo and behold. That's why I always tell people these are guidelines. These are trends, not rules.
We move closer to the pine tree. I see a couple of mushrooms on the ground below the tree. Squirrels often store mushrooms in trees to eat later. Then...
Whoa! They're all stacked up right there.
Oh, and there's a squirrel nest.
Right there. Yeah. Oh, my.
So there's
I can't believe how...
5 or 6 or 7 or 8... No, there's like a dozen mushrooms on the ground. That's how I saw it. And then there's a whole bunch of mushrooms stored just like half a foot off the ground. And then at head height, I've never seen so many mushrooms.
I've never seen this before. We almost walked by this. Hold on.
Like there are like every nook and cranny in this tree is crammed with mushrooms. There must be more than 100. I've never seen more than a handful of mushrooms in a tree before. Yeah, mushrooms crammed in there. And then this squirrel nest has so many mushrooms in it. This is so cool.
Okay, I gotta get a photo of this.
Yeah. I wonder how long it's going to take until this squirrel starts yelling at us.
Yeah.
I'm flabbergasted by the adaptability of red squirrels. They live a fast and frantic life. Just a few months after being born, they strike out to establish their own territory and then have to gather and cache enough food to survive winter.
Get away from stuff. I worked hard.
So when you read that red squirrels mostly eat the seeds of white spruce cones, well, it depends where the squirrel lives. If the squirrel doesn't live in a spruce forest, it looks like it's eating pine cone seeds and mushrooms. And you can see the nest, like there's grasses in there, there's feathers. Yeah, there's a whole bunch stacked on the nest. Like, it's amazing. Ow! Branch in the face. Wow. Many red squirrels don't survive their first winter. I wonder how this squirrel will fare with its Herculean foraging efforts. Squirrels that do make it through the winter will be ready to breed in early spring. If it's a good food year, they might even breed a second time in summer. Like I said, it's a fast and frantic life. Double truck, trailer. Great. Oh my God, we had such amazing wildlife encounters today. I'm stoked. On the drive back to the office, we spot a coyote crossing the road. Do you say coyote or coyote?
I think I'm in the coyote camp. I think I only say coyote when I'm referring to an animal chasing a roadrunner.
How do you think our colleague Tom would say it, senior wildlife biologist?
Is that the authoritative voice? Whatever he does, we have to do.
Well, let's hear it from him.
Well, I grew up always calling them coyotes.
Really? What? I thought for sure coyote was the more professional way.
So to solve this conundrum, I looked it up in my Oxford Canadian Dictionary, and it says coyote or coyote.
Oh, it's classic Canadian. We just have to make everyone happy.
Although,
can't choose one.
We often debate along at the office here about how to say pika.
Yeah.
The little animal that lives in the alpine. And that said pika. Some people say pika.
Yeah.
And even like, quote, pika experts I've heard say pika. So anyways, in Canada, apparently it's a pika.
Pika.
Anyway, back to the coyote. Tom was also mentioning, as we know, that it's not surprising that we saw a coyote because now I'm saying coyote.
Well, it's what Tom says. You gotta say it that way.
It's not surprising that we would see a coyote or a coyote out there in the forest because they're such versatile animals. You can expect to see them basically anywhere in the forest below a certain elevation. They're generalists and they go with their food sources.
Yeah, they eat all kinds of things, including squirrels.
They would definitely eat that squirrel.
The squirrels that piled up all those mushrooms in the tree.
Oh my God, that was so cool.
That squirrel went to so much effort.
I hope that squirrel makes it through the winter.
It deserves to. Like, it is really prepared for a Game of Thrones level of winter.
Yeah, it was really cool wondering that. Just that 200-meter stretch of a forest we walked through, just to see the diversity of the forest and all the critters that do or could live there, like the snowshoe hare. And
yeah, and I wouldn't say we were there at prime wildlife viewing time. Like, it was the middle of the day. We know that animals are often crepuscular. Dawn dusk kind of is good viewing. Late in the season, lots of things have moved on, lots of birds moved on, and we still had huge success just walking through that small patch of forest.
Yeah, we saw lots of animal sign, even of animals we didn't necessarily see. And you compare that habitat to the Takini Bridge fire burn that's only a couple of years old, and you can see how this habitat is just starting to grow up more, and there's just
more abundance of habitat and things for animals to eat.
You really get a sense of the forest is recovering and animals are returning, and it will continue to grow.
And we know forests recover after fire. However, we do want to do a PSA that in this podcast, we're talking a lot about the benefits of wildfire. Wildfire is very beneficial and it's necessary for the landscape, but that doesn't mean we want to be cavalier about it.
Yeah, like I don't want people to think like, oh, I can just leave my campfire because if it starts a forest fire, it's all good. The landscape needs it and the forest will grow back. Fighting these fires costs millions of dollars and tons of our resources and our time and our energy, and they put people's homes at risk. So the natural forest fire cycle is a good thing, but I just want folks to still be very careful those hot, dry summers, making sure that they are taking care of their campfires.
Absolutely. Okay, next episode.
Where are we headed? Have we decided yet?
We're going to go... We're going through the path of succession. So we're going to visit a predominantly pine forest.
So we're going to an older forest.
An older forest, yet. We're going to visit the Takini Valley Fire of 1958. So not to be confused with the Takini Bridge Fire of 2023. The Takini Valley Fire now is close to 70 years old, and there we see that it is a predominantly pine forest. At least, again, it was a big fire. There's a mosaic, but in the place we're visiting, it's predominantly a pine forest, and that's what we'll be looking at, the kind of habitat that creates.
So these trees are more mature, and different animals would be living there.
Exactly.
Okay, looking forward to it.
Me too. Oh, wait, I forgot to come up with a pun for this one. I'm pining for the next episode.
Did you really just pull that out right now?
I did, but I don't think it was that clever.
But I couldn't. If you said come up with a pun, I would just sit there with a blank face.
I'm so funny.
It was funny.
Okay, talk to you next time. This podcast was produced by the Yukon Department of Environment's Wildlife Viewing Program. Mixing and sound design was by Mark Kepke. Our theme music, White Bark Pine, was written and produced in the Yukon by Dana Jenajon and performed in collaboration with the Bennett Sun.
Fire's over, but that's only just the start.
There are no white bark pines in the Yukon, but you already knew that. This song was inspired by the white bark pine that survived the 2013 Rim Fire in Yosemite National Park, California. To learn more about wildlife in the Yukon, go to yukon.ca/wildlife viewing. You can download guides, posters, and resources and find out about free walks and talks. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with everyone you know who appreciates wildlife. Thanks for listening. See you on the trails.
For my home. With its cheek against the sky, upon the mountain spine, something